Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Serious. People who have discovered someone was going to try to or has tried to kill you. What's your story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I had a dangerous ex. He was one of those that was really charming and masterful at deception. He started beating me when I was diagnosed with cancer. Whoa. I kicked him out shortly after my recovery from cancer, but he had the mindset of, if I can't have you, no one can. We shared a daughter, and on his visits, he would usually be armed and make offhand comments about mommy disappearing. After a restraining order, he began stalking me, having his friends stalk me. I would get random calls from random numbers, and he would be the one threatening or have someone else threaten me. After years of changing my number, moving across multiple states, he found me again. That time I learned he was in the process of becoming a vetted member of a legitimately bad motorcycle club. He said he has been having me followed. I don't know how he found me, as at that time I had no social media presence, but I think he found some members of my family possibly. It was a truly terrifying 7 years of hiding and never trusting anyone, especially family. He died 2 years ago. I cried and cried when I found out. That kind of weight being removed. I still have concerns and paranoia, but it gets better with time. Years after it happened, little things fell into place. My dad was an addict, an alcoholic, and a guy who straight up wasn't ready to be a dad, and I doubt really ever could be. He'd grown up abused. He was a really great guy to start out, sweet, neglected, and a troublesome kid in school. He was an artist who worked in a paper mill. At the time of the incidents, I was too little to understand. Around 4 or 5 or maybe 6, I recall several times when things were very off. Things he did recklessly with us that maybe were the result of intoxication, but I now can read to be more like his attempts to free himself from a life he didn't want. He would drive recklessly when we were in the car, 100 miles an hour on several occasions, with us unbuckled. I remember being terrified those times, but not understanding exactly what he was doing. Once, my sister and I went over with him to his girlfriend's house while my parents were still divorcing, and he left us to sleep by ourselves in the trampoline. We lived in rural Vermont. I remember that night particularly thinking I was cold and really hungry, and I wanted to go inside, but I didn't know where the house was. The only reason I didn't wander off and get lost in the forest was because I was too tired to get up. I would have most likely died if I had left the trampoline, since there was no one for miles and bobcats in those woods. If I hadn't been killed, I might have been lost for days or simply starved to death. But those are examples of him not having the guts to do anything to us, just kind of hoping we'd disappear, I guess. One day though, I'm told, he came home high and took out his gun and told my mom he was going to kill us and himself. It wasn't the only time that happened. I don't know how she talked him down, but I remember her telling me the story for the first time and the heartbreak in her eyes when she said we were just playing in the next room. I felt guilty for years and still do almost 15 years later after it happened, thinking that I didn't do anything. Although I couldn't have, could I? I was only a little kid. And somehow I didn't die. It scares me to think about seeing him again. Last time I saw him I was 9 or 10. He's remarried with 2 kids now and apparently couldn't be happier. I wonder if they'll ever know what he tried to do. Look, lots of people become parents before they may be ready to become parents, but most normal people don't act that way. I'm glad you kind of came out okay from this. I don't know. That's a tough spot. I'm glad you're alright. My brother used to have a lot of drug and anger problems. He's tried to kill my mother on more than one occasion, literally waited around the corner of the house with a knife once. Anyways, he's even had psych evals and passed. My dad made it clear he could not get away with trying to kill our mom. Yeah, sounds so trivial, but it just moved onto me. Then he would try to kill me. He'd try to break through my door, come in through my window, waited for me in the hallways of our home. Once he was bashing my head against the toilet. Thankfully, I butt-dialed my dad, whom heard and called the police. For whatever sick and twisted reason, my father took it seriously when he was making murder attempts with my mother, but when it turned to me, he chose to act as if I was being dramatic. I kept trying to stand up for myself and make my dad see that what was happening was wrong, and he should have stood up for me more like he did with my mom. But he is his son, blah blah blah. Always sticks up for his son. Anyways, I ended up getting kicked out of the house, which is the best thing that ever happened to me. It's so nice not to have to hide in my room, afraid to leave while my parents aren't home because I'm receiving death threats, being slid under my door, and getting attacked in the hallways. I mean, it was really bad. I'd use a ladder to go in and out of my room. Sometimes I'd have to use the ladder to go outside the yard to pee because I couldn't use the house. It was bad. It's nice to hear a footstep outside of my door and not be fearful, although I still have PTSD from it. I've long lived away from home. Backstory. My uncle and aunt have been married for several years and have 3 kids. My uncle is a Sikh guy from India, and my aunt is Fijian Canadian. They both live in Canada. My aunt is my mom's sister, and my mom is the oldest child. This is relevant for later on. My great aunt threw herself a 60th birthday party at a fancy house and invited all of her friends and family, as one does, including my family and my aunt's family. My uncle starts fighting with my parents because he's mad that my grandfather didn't give a dowry to him for marrying my aunt. However, my grandfather has been dead since 2002 and died when my aunt was about 13, which is well before my aunt and uncle even met. We point this out, and then he gets mad that my parents didn't provide a monetary dowry to him and that we owe him money. He gets even more mad when my dad points out that he was fine with marrying my aunt without a dowry back then, so he should have complained then. They leave and we think it's finished. My uncle keeps harassing us and sending threatening phone calls, including to me, and threatens to rape and kill me. The only reason he didn't try and kill me is because we called the cops on him and he didn't want to go to prison. I haven't talked to him in almost 3 years, and it's for the best. My aunt is still with him, even though she knows what he wanted to do to me. That's the story of the 3rd time a relative wanted to kill me. Ex-girlfriend was a real piece of work that no one understood why I dated, but of course only made me want to defend her more. Anyway, one day out of the blue, she had me meet a bunch of her friends to play baseball. I'm not an athlete, nor did I play any regular sports or only met one of their friends before. After a little light skirmish sort of play, we all went to the woods to smoke, which was unusual. Well, lucky nothing happened, or they chickened out, or I was charming. She told me later I was lured to be beaten with baseball bats. Nice. You know, here in this little story I thought, oh look, a perfect opportunity to wish everybody a happy 420. And then they were going to jump you with baseball bats, which brings us right back to the reality of this post and the dangers of smoking with strangers in private. I had an uncle with apparent mental health issues that were undiagnosed, family scapegoat, whole family was dysfunctional, and he was always homeless, hitchhiking, or living in a shitty house or dirty trailer on drugs. The dude was brilliant when he was sober, but had the rotten luck of being born into a shitty family in the inner city. He was also my favorite uncle for that reason, and whenever he would come over, hungover, we would watch documentaries and stuff together. Anyway, like with most of these characters, he loved war documentaries and guns. Somehow, he had a whole arsenal of semi-automatics. I posted on Reddit before detailing how when I was a kid, we would come over to his house when he called, load up his drunk and or high ass in the car, clean up his house, which was filled with drug paraphernalia and alcohol, and have him detox at our house for a few weeks. One time, he was delusional or psychotic, was watching World War II documentaries and thought I was a Nazi. He pointed an AK-47 at my head, hesitated, and then yelled at me when he realized it was me. He then handed the gun to my mother to unload. He then gave all the guns away to other uncles, family members that had permits and such. Well, about 5 years later, he died of a massive heart attack, which I assume was drug-related. His mom, my grandma, was shockingly solemn and calm about it. She had been preparing for that day for years. After the funeral, she pulled me aside and informed me that she felt better because she didn't have to worry about him anymore, and that he was born with something wrong with him. She then told me that when I was in high school, he threatened to kill me and his children and grandchildren on a number of occasions because we were innocent and shouldn't see what he was going to do. which in context meant he was going to just slaughter the entire family. His mom was probably mildly intellectually disabled and a chronic enabler, and was convinced that if he tried anything, she could fight him off with some weapon like a kitchen knife she had around the house. Later, she asked one of her kids for a small handgun, which they loaned her and she kept stored in the basement wardrobe. She never filed a police report or had us move out of the house, had him held for a psych eval, or told us we were in danger. This was after I went to his house before or sometime around the funeral to clean up again, and found a different pile of guns, bullets, magazines, and weapons. As soon as I was able, I ended up getting a therapist, and she got diagnosed with PTSD from childhood. This happened when I was a junior or senior in high school. I was just about to leave to go hang out with some buddies when my father and uncle came home through the front door. I gave a quick hello and started walking out when my dad stopped me to talk to me about a citation I received about a broken brake light. I had explained to him that the deadline was a couple months away and that I would take care of it when I came back from hanging out, but all of a sudden, he kind of snapped at me and told me to get it done now. I was like, what the F? I repeated what I had said earlier, and that I also needed to get a signature from an officer as a proof of correction. I guess he took this as talking back and started yelling at me to take care of it right now or don't come back home. His reasoning was so unreasonable. All I remember responding to him was, "Are you being serious?" multiple times. My dad, only getting angrier after hearing that, starts to get physical with me. My uncle is verbally telling my dad to calm down and let it go, while my mom comes from the living room after hearing all the ruckus, trying to pry my dad off me. That's when he hit my mom. After that, I vaguely remember grabbing the lanyard from the back pocket, which was filled with keys and random-ass keychains, which gave it some weight. I used it like a flail and swung it with all my might and screamed to not hit my mom. The keys lacerated his right eye, and that's when my dad headed towards the kitchen. My uncle was whispering to me why I would hit my father while he was in the kitchen. I'm Korean, so to hit an elder is probably the worst mistake and culturally most disrespectful move, and I kept repeating why he would hit a woman. My uncle stops whispering and turns pale. He tells me to get the F out, because now my dad's holding an effing kitchen knife. I basically run out to the backyard, and my own father is now chasing me around the house with a kitchen knife in circles trying to kill me. The third time running around the house, I grab a set of car keys and attempt to get in the car to get as far away as possible. As I'm running in the backyard once more towards the front of the gate, my dad took a shortcut from the garage, so now he's about a couple arm lengths from me. I managed to unlock the car door, get in, and barely lock the doors before he could open it. When I mean barely, I mean he pulled the door handle just as I locked it, and the lock mechanism was making this grinding noise as if it was going to get released. Honestly, thank God for that. Now, my dad and I are separated a few inches apart by the car window. His face is dripping with blood, and he's holding a kitchen knife in his hands. He proceeds to try and smash the window by stabbing it and turning it around and using the handle of the knife as a blunt object. Failing to smash the window, he keeps pounding on the window, desperately trying to get to me. He sees me start the car, so he stabs the driver's side tire, and I drive off to my friend's house with a flat while hysterically crying. I stayed at my friend's house for a week before I came back. From that point on, I stayed in my room and never left unless I confirmed Dad was in his room or gone to work by my little brother or mom. My dad did the same thing and stayed in his room, only to come out if I was either in my room or in school. It was basically an effing game of cat and mouse avoiding each other for 3 years before he actually moved out. This was a fairly traumatic experience, and writing this out makes me sick. I'm forgetting some things in this story, but I'm sure it's for the best. I dislike recalling anything from my high school days because of this, and our relationship is so odd. I also feel like I lost my sense of purpose in life because he was the man I respected and aspired to be growing up. My own brother, who is into the criminal lifestyle, threatened my life when talking to him on the phone because he believed I had something to do with him getting interrogated over a serious crime that he committed. He thinks I ratted on him because he told me in great detail what he did a few months before and how he did it. In reality, it was the cops who called me asking for info because he was already suspected, and I'm his brother. I told him at the time that I couldn't provide info because he was unpredictable, and I wasn't going to jeopardize my safety for their investigation that I knew they had many other testimonies for. What's even worse is that the whole event has ripped my family apart. My grandma, who raised us as kids, is protecting him and denying that he's done these horrible things. She also believes him over me, and she bailed him out while he awaits trial, and I couldn't even visit her for Christmas because he's living with her. It's a very effed up situation. A little long, but whatever, I'm just reading it. My most recent ex. He was a raging alcoholic and severely abused me for months. He started selling all my belongings to people, including my BMW and $600 laptop. Anyway, I don't know this was happening because I was forced to stay in a room with a lock on the outside, no windows, and a bucket. A few months into this, I found out I was pregnant. Once he found out, he flipped, wanted me to get an abortion, but I refused. So I'm 4 months pregnant in a hotel with a homicidal psycho, wasn't allowed to leave or have a phone, and was being tortured for 7 days straight. Like him punching my feet and ankles so I couldn't walk, handcuffing me to the bed or toilet when he would allow me to go with him to the store. I was able to jump out of the car and try to wave down a truck, but he didn't see me, which followed by him ripping my hair out of my head every time he grabbed it to make sure he had a good grip so I couldn't jump again. The last 2 things he did before I got help was forcing me to take a bunch of pills to kill either myself or my baby. And when I refused, he cut my wrist to the bone hoping I'd bleed out. But of course, I didn't. But thankfully he was drunk, and I was able to snatch his phone and lock myself in the bathroom to call 911. They got there seconds before he broke down the door. I have a 4-inch scar with 21 stitches to prove it. He did way more to me in the months he held me captive, pouring soda, baby oil, cooking grease, and other liquids on my head, body, and bed, throwing me into walls and on the floors, putting a knife to his neck, telling me to kill him, which I did, beatings, just anything and everything you can think of he did to me. I'm very lucky to be alive, yes. And they say all the good ones are taken. I'm very sorry you went through all of that. You definitely deserve better. I hope that guy is rotting somewhere in jail. Sorry. I'm allergic to peanuts, and my middle school bully was curious to watch someone die. I know this was her motivation because she told me a lot how and why she was going to kill me before actually trying to kill me. I noticed there was an M&M smashed under my locker handle before I touched it, but the school didn't want to do anything and said I was equally at fault for reasons. Apparently, death threats aren't real unless they specify a weapon that would kill anybody, not just specifically me. Anyway, that's why I have a GED instead of a high school diploma. That hasn't impacted my life at all, actually. I was able to go to a real college, then swap over to a trade school, and now I have a great job. My mental health, on the other hand, was effed up for years. Probably still is, to be honest. I lived with my cousins for a while when I was in 4th grade. We lived in a small trailer for 7 of us. So basically what it was Grandma and Grandpa in a bed, me and cousin 1 in a bed, cousin 2 and 3 in a bed, and Dad on the couch. Cousin 1 is a little psycho, but I didn't care. We were like best friends at the time. One day, I went to lay down and go to bed early because I was tired. When I laid my head down, I felt something weird under my pillow and found a huge kitchen knife meant for like watermelon or something. We don't know who he was planning on using it on. He never told us, but for some effed up reason, we didn't get rid of him either. Fast forward 3 years, and he pulled a knife on me 3 times in a month. 2 instances, though I'm not certain how seriously I took either. 1. I worked as a debt collector center. We had some rather strict guidelines around how often we could contact people and how to handle people who were in debt counseling. I was talking to a man about his bounced check, around $45 with collection fees, and he just snapped and started threatening me. I'd already given him the address where he could drop off a payment, same place I worked. He threatened over and over to come there and shoot me and everyone in the office. I told my manager, and he just shrugged and said they get threats all the time. Nothing came of it. 2. I worked at a dry cleaner's, and the leather and jeans suit that the customer dropped off came out about $50 more expensive than I had tentatively quoted him, as we didn't actually do the leather cleaning and didn't always know what they would charge us. All explained to the customer. I actually called him to get an okay for that amount, and he said yes. It was a month of calling him to tell him the clothes were in before he showed up to collect them. He lost his shit when I told him the cost, and he tried to come behind the counter to grab his clothes. I held the door closed and told him he couldn't have them without payment. He threatened me over and over and eventually said, "I'm gonna come back here with my 9 and smoke your stupid ass." So I called the police. I've never seen so many cops show up, 3 squad cars and 4 cops on bikes. He eventually agreed to pay with a check after the police dragged him out of the building and talked to him. Didn't find out until 5 years later. Ex-girlfriend called me out of the blue and told me that she was glad I didn't come home on a certain night because she was hiding in a bush outside waiting to stab me. Whoa. She said she waited there all night and then went home in the morning after realizing I wasn't coming home. She had since moved to another state and found my new number and address by reaching out to old friends. I asked her why she was telling me this now, and she said it was a step in her recovery to apologize for people she did wrong. Haven't heard from her since, but rumor has it she's homeless now and strung out.